This is Kudzu Creative with a quick portfolio video I'd like to call No More Death by PowerPoint, featuring some work we just put together for an Atlanta-based company called ControlScan, which offers a set of technology solutions designed to ensure security, compliance, and ultimately market differentiation for financial services companies involved in credit card transactions, specifically banks and merchant service providers. So in this case, ControlScan provided us with a fairly standard death by PowerPoint type presentation, the ones we're all familiar with, lots of bullets and even more copy, stylistically and conceptually the sort of presentation virtually every company comes up with. So we took that presentation and selected a few slides from it to rework, ones we thought would best show the type work we do in this space, and we created 3 conceptual options using those slides as a baseline to provide a feel for what form a full PowerPoint might take. So in this first concept option, we chose to do 2 primary things. The first was very much to simplify the method used to communicate the message so the reader is able to immediately absorb the messaging. So instead of full slides dense with chunks of copy the eye can't distinguish between, we chose to mix a very crisp, clean, modern set of vector icons with a much smaller amount of copy, ensuring that the copy itself was mapped to the style of the vector icons. To do that, we selected again a very minimalist, modern, clean font style. The second thing we wanted to demonstrate was a serious yet subtle undertone we felt would be appropriate to the conservative financial services industry, and you see that here in some selections we made for slide backgrounds that visually and thematically are appropriate to the topic, but we took the imagery we selected and blurred it, so while it's still recognizable on almost a subliminal level, it's not distracting to the viewer or competing in any way with the primary messaging the company wants to communicate. Okay, enough on that concept option. And here we have a second concept that from a style and color palette selection is significantly lighter or less weighty to take in. Now the appropriateness or not of a concept like this really depends just on how much the company wants to be associated with a cloud-based model. We know from companies like Salesforce that these light, airy themes coupled with strong, clear statements can be very effective. So we chose to offer an option that matched the same crisp, clean icon and copy style with variations on cloud-based imagery. And you can see here that unlike the photographic imagery backgrounds of the previous selection, it can actually be much easier to manipulate a vector-based background to give you just the amount of clear space you need to communicate your message, with the overall effect being that of a very simple, modern, flexible, and easy to look at style where, again, what is front and center is the messaging. There's nothing competing with the message you're trying to articulate to your audience. Okay, so that more or less wraps up option 2. Option 3, which has many of the same modern stylistic elements in terms of the clean, crisp icons and matching fonts, but is extremely different in how it presents those elements, this time in a style that is much heavier. And while I personally gravitate to designs that are a bit lighter to look at, the truth is that this industry is among the most serious and most conservative in the marketplace. So we felt this combination of blue-toned photographic images with large swaths of black with contrasting white copy conveyed both strength and boldness, but within the appropriate parameters around the soberness or seriousness associated with the financial services industry. That wraps up the discussion of these particular options presented to a company working in a particular industry. Obviously, the type of technology company you are and the nature of both your solution and your primary audience base would drive what might be appropriate in your scenario. But I think what this does show well is that it's possible to take your most critical messaging and deliver it in a way that not only distinguishes you from your competitors in the marketplace, but perhaps even more importantly, presents messaging in such a way that it can actually be effectively absorbed and digested by your audience without the standard challenges, which in my mind are either just affecting because they're bludgeoned by yet another hideous PowerPoint, or confused because slides carry too much information presented in such a way that it all becomes a big gom of copy that you just don't want to look at. And these challenges are, of course, before we even get to situations where copy is too small to even be legible, or includes things like amateurish clip art that only serves to reduce your credibility in the eyes of the viewer. I mention this because there are a lot of cool infographic type PowerPoints that are showing up in places like Slideware, and a lot of those are fun and effectively communicate some very specific messaging very well. But the truth is that for the most part, unless you're talking about a topic like marketing or social media, they're not serious enough for most of the technology industry. Options like the ones we've seen here merge some of the most effective visual tactics those presentations use, but make them more modern and crisp and clean and serious, essentially appropriate for the technology community. With that said, the last thing I'll mention is that I've heard people look at these slide decks and love them visually, but be concerned about the in-field flexibility, needing their sales folks to be able to make adjustments on the fly. So for the record, you can have your cake and eat it too in this space. You can essentially lock down any elements you don't want to change in your presentation. Typically, this would be appropriate for figures and diagrams, but you can allow as much or as little editability as you think is appropriate. Best practices typically dictate the core corporate approved slides be locked down or flattened, but that clean option slides with matching backgrounds and font styles be created in the slide master for the deck so that your sales team can add as much unique information information as may be needed for a particular client. This takes care of the requirement for flexibility in a way that doesn't jeopardize the visual integrity of the slide deck as a whole, but the truth is you can lock down or not lock down however much you think is appropriate for your unique use case. Okay, that's officially it. Sorry to have run over in time, but as always, thanks for hanging in there. These are a few of the great technology companies we've provided work to. Would love to include you in the mix. Thanks again for tuning in.